people of color from, for instance, the Caribbean or Latin America who are not Black and are listening to this type of music, they feel like they have a license to say the N-word when it's in songs. As long as I'm not saying it to you, it's okay for me to say it. Or as long as you're my friend, it's okay for me to say it. So yeah.
You know I can't help but these, cause they know they can never touch these. So baby, let me talk my shit, or I might just throw another feed.
I saw a very interesting video recently. I don't know the people's names in the video, but it was an altercation between a student who looks like a POC but not Black and a teacher who is Black, and maybe a Gen Xer or a young baby boomer. So this person is significantly older than this very, very young student. And the student is like just nigga this, nigga that, nigga at this man, trying to be like, yo, come on, nigga, let's go, let's fight. Like trying to fight with this teacher, this older man. And the teacher is the one who wound up swinging on the boy.
Are you serious?
And I thought to myself, like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, who the fuck raised this?
Right.
Little boy who's not Black, who's hurling the N-word because somebody, someplace, there was some messaging that told him that it was okay. And probably is your favorite hip hop artist, no shade. So he decided that it's his word. He gets to be able to say it. He's hurling it at this man whom we don't know. He probably marched over a bridge or two. And he swung and hit the shit out of him. And the most petty part of me was like, hallelujah, yes, you need to get your ass beat. Because clearly nobody beat your ass before. But you're going to learn on today. But the more responsible academic version of myself is like, oh, well, he shouldn't have hit him. That's irresponsible. How could he? But I'm talking about the stuff that we often don't speak about, which is the anger. The anger that's inside of this young person who is approaching the teacher this way, who has no boundaries and no respect for the fact that this is a Black man who you're hurling the N-word at, right? So that commodification of street culture, that commodification of our own, the way that we speak with each other, it belongs to everyone. This, to me, is another type of violence, right? That I think that people don't talk about. The violence of having music that gives the impression that that nigga's for everybody, right? That same 50-something% that somebody was talking about who consume the music who are not Black, right? So now they may pause when they hear the N-word. If there's another melanated person in the room, maybe they won't say it, but the majority of the time they are, right? They feel like they belong. Now they can feel like they feel like they can be in the face of somebody who you're supposed to respect and fight them. So my thing is like, for all of us, I'm still in the hood. So being in the hood, I hear conversations with kids all the time, reciting, listening to rap lyrics. It just happens. It's a part of the culture. That shit has not changed since I was coming up, I'll say that. But also the continuation of talking about violence and wanting to beat somebody up and all of these kinds of things. In my mind, I'm like, y'all could say that there's no correlation, but the lie detector determined that was a lie. I'm trying to figure out like, how, because I know that you're a parent, how do you think about, like, do you let your child listen to that kind of music and why not?
Absolutely not. I mean, my experience is a little different. First of all, I'm a pastor's kid, so I was very sheltered. I wasn't allowed to listen to secular music. Anybody who grew up in the church knows what secular music is. So I came into hip hop and secular music later on in life. And in some ways, I'm grateful for a little bit of the sheltering because I was exposed to such positive messages and positive music that by the time I got to that point, I could filter out better what it was that I wanted in my space and in my ear. And I was exposed to all of it and what I didn't. And as a parent, that's exactly what I'm doing for my son. Like, I can't shelter him from anything. I have a cell phone for him because I'm afraid of mass shootings and they happen all the time. He goes to a school that's predominantly white. So I'm like, oh, I'm scared. Exactly. So you're going to have your phone. You know, he has YouTube, he has access to YouTube. So of course he listens to music and I have, benchmarks and things in place so that he doesn't hear, but things get through. Yeah. And so how I counterbalance that is I expose him to music that I like, that I think that he will like, that may cross over the generation or just in my generation, because my generation of hip hop, I feel like, well, I don't know, because that's kind of like I feel like it's a contradiction, but there was some positive music in my generation of hip hop that I can expose him to and say, this is the kind of music you want to listen to because I want you to be built up. I don't want you to be tore down. So that's why I have you listen to Common. That's why I have you listen to Nas. And yeah, I know you're hearing this and that and the other, but at the end of the day, you didn't grow up that way. And I certainly don't want you to turn into those things. I don't want you to perpetuate those, and I don't want you to be commodified as part of that culture. So yes, I want you to enjoy hip hop culture, but I want you to learn how to filter those things out that will not behoove you, because guess what? If you keep talking about violence, eventually you're going to become violent. If you keep seeing drugs, you might want to try it, you know? And so I just kind of talk him through what he's seeing and what he's hearing so that he has a balance on those things. And I don't think that parents nowadays do that. I don't know if they ever did it because it's music. So you think music is a universal language. So music is music, whatever. But no, music is not music. Like I said, there are studies that show that music has a profound effect on human behavior. And we know if it started revolutions, it knows like if I'm in a good mood and I listen to depressing music, I'm gonna be sad. If I'm listening to certain hip hop and something like, I could be like, oh, but I'm from the burbs of like New Jersey. Like I never pulled a gun or whatever. But I'm sitting here and I'm like, but it never made me necessarily want to go and do those things. But again, I have a different upbringing, but people don't always have that. So they grew up in these environments that might have been toxic or might have been dangerous. And so they relate to it. And so I think people need to start kind of having conversation about what reality is and what they're seeing and try and find a distinction. But I think as people, we need to demand of our artists to start putting more positive music out in the atmosphere. Talk about your experience, but where are you going from there? Are you just going to stay here? And I'm always going to go back to that because we can't just keep staying
advocating here. Media literacy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
there's a name to it.
Yeah, there's a whole name for it because it wouldn't even just be music. It's also what people are watching passively and actively.
Exactly. Yes.
It's all the things can, change your emotions or what have you. Yeah. So I'm like, I definitely agree. I mean, as part of what I do a 5-day pleasure challenge, and one of the challenges is to listen to music that gets you in that mood. Right? Build that cadence, friend. So like I definitely understand what you're saying in there, and I would say that the media literacy, part of the responsibility then is going to be on the parents. Some of the responsibility, because I can't necessarily tell you don't make what you want to make music-wise, but certainly I can say I'm not finna listen to that shit. And like, let's be real, money talks, bullshit walks. So if you decide that y'all over here faking Drake, you a gangster, Degrassi. If you want to say like, oh no, we're not doing that shit no more, and you want to like pull the card, as was said earlier, as well as say like, let's deconstruct this song that we're listening to, and let's talk about the parts of it that we like versus the parts of it that we don't like versus the part that doesn't even seem to be fitting in any level of reality or making any type of sense. Like, let's have those conversations.
That sounds like a show.
To be honest, I'm going to keep it a bean. That's a lesson I did with my students. Like I say, can you argue that the City Girls Act Up is a feminist anthem? Can you argue it from this perspective? You break down the lyrics and you see a bunch of different answers appear. But it's a fun thing because you realize, like, as an English teacher, they don't know how to critically engage with work. And that's a skill that is missing now. And so now it is to this point of like, TikTok is instant gratification. We were talking about this earlier. Is like, once you find the niche that works for you, you're doing the same dance for the next 10 TikToks, right? Oh, yeah. Because that's going to be what comes in. You don't have to engage with anything that's different. And so because of that, I'm noticing like the other part of the conversation is kids don't have a sense of self right now. Because they don't have a sense of self right now. And we're not truly in community with each other anymore. So nobody actually truly cares. And so because of that, it's a lack of communal space. It's a lack of critical engagement, media literacy. And it's the other part of it is like, you don't know who you are and there's no starting point. Like I was like, I have to approach education completely differently now because that space where I could engage in creativity, engage in like, well, what does Marquise actually like? What does Marquise not like? Well, I really like this, right? They're not doing that anymore because at this point, it is just like, here's what I got, here's what I consume. So I don't even know if people are actively engaging with music. It's a passive consumption.
And some parents aren't parenting.
You said, I'm looking like parents are having mini-me's right? There's a narcissistic masturbatory exercise in having children to be you. You want the kid to be you, so what do you want them to do? Listen to your music. Yeah. You want them to like the things that you like, and for y'all to, cool. Yeah, so you want to be cool. You don't want to parent. Oh, no. Right? And you certainly don't want to engage in critical discourse about the shit that you like, that you're encouraging your kid to like.
So probably where you were problematic.
It's a little bit.
But you can do, I feel like
1 second, Juice. Let that, we're going to let that
I also want to talk more about, because you talk about accountability, but I think we have some communal economic accountability. Like, we can start paying for people to be diverse again. And so what we're talking about, what we're missing from the yesteryear, and everybody looks back more nostalgia, but I feel like artists used to be artists, and it wasn't a gimmick. Now music is just a gimmick, because you don't make money off of music anymore. It's the image. The image is what is profitable. And so because we have said that this is what we want to see, we want to see that violence, that's what's paid. You know, R&B is dead. Like, that's the thing, right? So you had that counterbalance. I would listen to.
It's coming back. It's coming back.
2023 is going to be R&B's year. Stop playing.
It's a hashtag. It's a hashtag. It's a hashtag. It's not real. You know? Hashtags are not a real place. Back in the day, it was counterbalanced. So we had the De La Souls who were doing this, but we also had LL Cool J. We also had people like NWA, but we also had, you know, still like Johnny Gill and all these other people. So there was more diversity. Now all of this is blended because the image is what is. It's not the music. The image is what sells. So even the R&B artists are hip hop artists. You know what I mean? So the music, even in the soul music, is still that same violence. It's like, this is what the violence has done for me. There's no, because why? It's not profitable to have that diversity of message anymore. And so we need to start paying and using our dollars, our accountability economically, and saying we want artists to be artists again.
Well, an aspect to this is I'm sitting here and I'm really enjoying the conversation, but I'm also trying to absorb all of the ways in which I listen to hip hop music and have been since I've been growing up here, and how I engage with it, and all of the ways in which maybe I have absorbed the anti-Black narrative of violence and it being inherently violent. But I'm also paying attention to all of the non-Black people, POC or otherwise, who are trying to emulate the culture. Like you said, it's become very performative, where you're trying to emulate the culture without belonging to it or contributing to it. So we talked about Bad Baby a little while ago in a different episode.
The Baby?
No, Bad Baby.
Catch Me Outside.
So the Catch Me Outside girl.
Catch Me Outside.
Has no experience with anything of what she's talking about, but she has profited so much off of pretending to be that. And she's not the only one. There are so many examples of it on TikTok, on Instagram. Literally, it's everywhere. And when I look at people of color from, for instance, the Caribbean or Latin America who are not Black and are listening to this type of music, they feel like they have a license to say the N-word when it's in songs. As long as I'm not saying it to you, it's okay for me to say it. Or as long as you're my friend, it's okay for me to say it. So yeah.
How do y'all feel about? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but that's leads into my question of like, how do you feel about that trickle down effect of not for Black folks, but for people outside of the culture who are also consuming, also giving in the dollars, and using it as an excuse to act the way that they act.
Dr. Donna just said it. You got to stop giving passes. That's up to us. That has nothing to do with me. When I'm in a room full of people and it's mixed and it's white and it's Spanish and all these people, and certain songs come on and I know the lyrics, my head's on a swivel because I want to see who's gonna say it, because I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna be looking right at you because I want you to say it while I'm looking at you. That's our job to do that. That has nothing to do with the music. I'm not gonna tell people to stop saying nigga if that's the word. You know, if they're a Black person and that's the word that you know, they've reclaimed and that they use in their everyday life. I'm not going to tell them, but it's my job to stop these people from saying it while they're in my presence.
Can you get my family? They from Puerto Rico, so there's like an intersection of hip hop with them.
Invite me to the cookout.
So I'd be like, fam, you can't say that.
Invite me. I'm laying right on the table like, what?
But they think it's okay. They really, really think it's okay. And in a lot of ways, I remember watching an episode of Rami. So Rami is Arabic, I think Egyptian or Palestinian, and there was an episode where he went to Egypt to visit his family, and his family is not black, but they were listening to hip hop music, and they were basically like, oh, we're African, we're basically black, so we can do this, we can say this. And I love that he put that in the episode, because I can think back to visiting, Puerto Rico and hearing people saying the N-word, and I'm over here like, when did this start? Very confused. And so I hate that you have to do that, because your experience and listening to music that comes from your culture, you shouldn't have to have the swivel, right? That's where I'm coming from, is like, what responsibility do non-black people have to make sure that they are educating themselves, that they are enjoying the music, but not perpetuating something that's potentially harmful or putting you in a position where you have to swivel your head? Yeah.
So to answer that question, back to the idea that young people are still trying to figure out who they are, and they don't know necessarily who they are, or going to be. Again, if non-black people or POC, but mostly white people consume hip hop, this might seem shady. Some white people attest to it, some don't. But when it comes to culture, oftentimes white people have culture, but white people have culture, not whiteness. So what I mean by that is there's Irish culture, there's Scottish culture, but there's no white culture, because oftentimes white culture is American culture, which is very much black culture, or a mixture of Spanish culture or Mexican culture specifically. So I feel like when it comes to non-black or non-POC individuals, they're seeking a place, an identity, and to be the black kid is to be cool. And of course they're going to follow that, and that's what the bad baby does, because it's also lucrative. It's also a status symbol, but also, yes, you may correct people, but no shade, you ain't the person with the power that's really having influence. It is unfortunate you do that, but you're not that producer in the booth that's telling that white person not to say it, or you're not that one black rapper, oh, it's okay because you my homie. The people who have clout are giving these non-black people these passes, and we've seen this trickle down from even as a gay person. Obviously, to me, bitch most of the time is being derogatory to women, but from my gay perspective, everyone's a bitch. A bitch can be a person, noun, thing, or an adjective. Bitch is like work. Bitch is like, what the fuck are you doing? But at the same time, because of hip hop now, and I know it sounds it's low-key respectability politics, but there's some truth into it. Like, going from the N-word to the word bitch, like, black women have been complaining about that word since the 80s. I remember, in my hip hop class, we were talking, women have wrote books on why are these black rappers calling us bitches? But when, Miley Cyrus is featured on these songs, or Katy Perry is featured on these songs, you're not calling these white women bitches. Right. You're not calling these non-black women bitches. Right. So it's become a norm. It's also become a part of the culture. So now they think, okay, if I want to be this cool person, I'm going to be a bad bitch. So a bad bitch is also, yes, liberating, but it's also, damn, you took the word bitch to the point where it was used to be derogatory towards you, but now also you took the word bad bitch and now you're adding female empowerment, but also it's still degrading.
You can't can't just dissect the toxicity out, because for that little kid whose black friends probably allow him to say the N-word, I would argue, because I see it a lot now, is that you can't then look at the black teacher and be like, nigga, 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 and I'm supposed to believe, you talk, friend, no, you want to fight him, so I know you're using the N-word in a certain context. It gets really, really, really strange. I think it's very much about the influence, like you said, because everybody wants to be an influencer, but nobody wants to actually take responsibility for being influential. Yeah. Right? When you are actually in a place where millions and millions and millions of people are following you, but you throw your hands up and say, it wasn't me, the music isn't violent, I'm not violent, I didn't do nothing, so what I call people bad bitches, it is, or a bitch, it doesn't make a difference, or I say nigga, 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 nigga. I'm just like, the thing is I get it. There was somebody, his name is George. George was on a show a long time ago, and he said, black people have taken scraps and made it into something delicious. And in talking about the N-word, but also talking about food, right? Like the scraps, and literally making it into something delicious that we eat to this day, our stews, things like that. It came out of poverty, right? So I actually feel very sympathetic and empathetic towards taking things that people have said to hurt us and to take it and to put power into it. I think that that's completely fine. I just don't think that we need to be in a place where we're pretending that things aren't happening when they are happening. Because black folks, we have been on a path of acquiring power. And in acquiring that power, we're trying to figure out how to wield it and shape it so that it's ours. We're also trying to actually define blackness outside of the white gaze. When you have people who get to pull the strings, we'll bring the white folks back into the conversation for a second. When you have white people who are pulling the strings of what's actually happening, but you have a level of players who are willing to engage. When you have an industry like the NFL that has majority black players, but no one is willing to step out to say, let's start our own shit, there is a passivity, right, that we have, and then we kind of like articulate our way out of it. So it's kind of like, yeah, you know, it's not violent, it's not such a big deal, you know, it's really about poverty, it's about all those things. It is about those things, but we also have people who understand, who have bought into capitalism, and capitalism doesn't give a fuck about what's going on in Flatbush. Capitalism cares about making money off of Flatbush. So if you're a black person, you're saying like, I want in on the money game, let me do it too. I'm looking at you like, I'm not fucking with you. You are an agent of white supremacy for me. So when I'm listening to people and you calling me, you just niggering me out, I can't figure out what else I can be called. I'm not fucking with you.
So what do you do about Fat Joe?
We don't do. I don't even acknowledge or recognize Fat Joe as a person, and that's
the reaction though. We're not Fat Joe. We get it.
I don't care.
But like, how's that happen?
Honestly, important though, because we give him a pass. We give him a pass, and the thing is like, oftentimes just because people think because you're Puerto Rican, you are intrinsically black or have some black roots, and I'm not saying that's not the truth, but we forget the fact that just because you may be Puerto Rican and have black blood or black lineage does not mean that's how you receive, that's not how you interact, that's not how you're treated in the world.
Or how you even present.
And then he does a disservice when he says, my homie say I can say that. And this is what also, when I was in school, that's another thing that makes me angry. when it comes to the N-word, non-black folks say, I was raised in the hood, I get to say it. So now you're equating poverty and to the associating to blackness and giving you a rite of passage to say it. And it's like, being called a nigger wasn't because I was in power. Being called nigger was because of my skin color and in a way to degrade me and to make me understand that I am less than. Right. So again, you want to call me that because you want to be called my homie, but you're not understanding the cultural significance and the history and why we are trying to reclaim it. But let alone when you're my skin color and I ask you if you're black, you say, no, you're Dominican. You deny your blackness even if it is a part of you. Because
but I
again,
like that word though. I'm gonna use it.
Right. Yeah. Because it's cool. It has clout. And I want to be a nigga. I want to be just like you, but not what you go through.
Right.
I want to be a part of you, but I don't want to experience your bullshit.
Say really
Thank you, Elijahdā.
Go ahead,
TaDeo.
The reason that this happens, and again, I push back. You know, I keep my foot on the neck of the whitinos and the mestizos all the time because black people actually exist within Trinidad. That's my whole spiel. When we actually came here, what you were called is what your race was. So we have actual Puerto Ricans that were black were actually called it derogatorily, right? And so when the N-word, the pass you get is, would anybody in anger call you this, right? And so Fat Joe went and passed that test, right? He would have been called wetback or any other spick or something like that, right? He would have people that look like me, all of the people that are from Panama that have just fully, so there's a difference between cultural identity and racial identity, right? And so cultural blackness is what we're talking about, but we can't mistake that with the racialized blackness because a lot of people that are racially black are not culturally black as in the United States. However, when people are coming here and they're saying that I want to pass to this, I want to do this, I want to have blah, 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 you have to remember that it's because anti-blackness is parasitic to blackness. So what does that mean? People, what parasites do is they love to consume the thing, but we keep the things that have been consumed. So anti-blackness means we want to get rid of black people, but we need to keep what black people have produced, right? And so that's why people are not buying into blackness; they're buying into the black culture because the production of it. That's why they want to replace black people with more passing, palatable people, and then so I would make even the argument that a lot of more kind of racially ambiguous people paved the ways for the Mac Millers and for the like that wouldn't have been a thing in the past. The Vanilla Ice tried that in the past and it didn't work, right? But
Thank
now
God.
it's commonplace because why? There's that buffer state of okay, you got a little bit of racial capital, right? That currency that you have because you are partially black, which then leads the door to this person who has no racial capital, but they're trying to make the argument off of a cultural relevance. Like I'm culturally black, right? But I don't have the racial blackness, and so that's the argument that the non-black Latinos use all the time.
Yeah, no, it don't hit.
Doesn't work for me.
It's not hitting that excuse.
Doesn't work because if you were like when I first got here, you know what I mean? I was called nigger, like with a hard ER.
Yeah.
Hard ER, right? And so there's a difference between the Latinos that people need to ask you if you're Latino and the Latinos that people need to ask you if you're black.
Yeah, a big difference. Thank
Yeah,
you for
and
that,
that's
TaDeo.
absolutely true because even when I moved to the United States, that's not a thing I ever experienced. I experienced wetback, spick, anything, even like Arabic, slurs, but I never once heard that. And that's what brought me the level of confusion of seeing first generation, second generation Latinos who looked like me saying the N-word, something I had to learn the history of. I didn't even know English at the point. And so once I started figuring out, oh, these are the lyrics, this is what they're saying, now I'm looking at people who look like me like, why are you saying it?
But
Who told you your ass to
It's
say
a different
this?
social
Yeah.
contract though, because historically, if we're looking at hip hop as a culture, it is black and Puerto Rican. If we're gonna be fully honest, like in terms of the people who brought it up together, and so if we're gonna keep it a bean with everybody, like yes, I grew up in a very multi-ethnic community, and they were like, oh well, they're gonna say it, the Hispanics gonna say it, the black people gonna say it, everybody gonna say it because we didn't know any better, and we didn't have the racial social contract that we have today. And I think that's just the difference of reckoning that we are also having is because historically, hip hop was bred from two ethnicities, a couple different cultures, and came up together. However, racially, it became a lot blacker, and that's who we claim it to be. But the word was used within community. So if I'm gonna be honest around even where I came from outside the intellectual stuff, that was everybody's drawn together. But now I think with this new social contract, we are having this like backtrack of like, well, did we accept this before? I knew I used to, and 12, 13, I said, oh, you can say you're good. But I see my Pop Leroy, I wasn't saying around him. You weren't gonna say near my Pop Leroy, but very different. So I think that's the other part that we have to also take accountability for, because it was very normalized for us growing up. Whether I don't know how it was in New York, but I know, Philly, Reading area was very much so. Everybody's saying it. So I do also question around like this space that we have now and this almost like moral superiority of like, no, you shouldn't say it now. But we used to grow up and stuff like that.
It wasn't for J-Lo. Because y'all remember when J-Lo said it in that
She
song.
did?
What? They ate her up.
Oh no, you about to start a whole new episode.
She did with one of the rappers.
But we do
They
have
ate
to
her
rap.
up. They ate her alive.
Marcus,
With Ja Rule, they ate her alive
what
about
do you mean,
that.
Tiffanie?
Yeah.
And so it's still been a question of like who can say who can, but it just may not have been as prominent as it is now.
Right.
But I remember that they ate her up, and I was a kid, and I was like, I don't understand what's happening. They let her have it. Like, why would you ever? I think they even took it out of the song,
Right.
Because it was becoming such a thing. It
became a thing.
like put the song back out without her saying it in
Right.
there.
When I'm Real came out and she used the N-word in the song, you were on that song.
I wrote it. Some people probably see her as white. They don't understand the dialogue that is used in our hoods. You know what I'm saying? They don't understand. And that's how Puerto Ricans and Spanish people speak. That's how black people speak. And we are allowed to speak that way amongst each other.
There's also the conversation around Cardi B and whether she should be able to say it because she's Dominican. I think fully Dominican.
Well, I think
She's
her
half
father's like,
Trinidadian.
the same.
So that's like the curve.
And it's weird because technically, some people argue her and Cardi and Nicki Minaj are very much the same mixture because I think her father's Trinidadian, Indian Trinidadian, and I think her mother is like Caribbean, and Cardi B's father or parent is in Trinidadian. So people have argued, does even Onika Mirage have the right to say this?
Right.
But do you see how like deep in the weeds we are with this?
Yeah.
In terms of like who gets to say, who gets to offend me and who doesn't, or who gets to love us and who doesn't. It's
Just Black
very
Americans.
fucking confusing. But in terms of it as a system and how the culture then plays into the system, it directly and disproportionately, I believe, affect Black people. Do you want to jump in?
I did. I wanted to say that, and hopefully this isn't off the topic, but I think that we can't just talk about violence and hip hop without talking about other genres of music. And I say that because I listen to country music because I love the harmonies. I'm a dancer, so I dance salsa, bachata, merengue, tumbao, Afro beats. I dance all of it. So I'm exposed to a lot of different music. And one of the things I notice is I don't see the degradation of women and other people's cultures towards themselves like I see in hip hop. Like when I listen to country music, they might be talking about love and heartbreak and, what's the song by Carrier that I keyed her car, I slashed her tires or whatever, right? Right, but it's not to the degree where you feel like someone's gonna murder someone. It's just like you're really upset, lady, and you just want to get this out.
Just gonna fuck your shit up.
Or I listen to reggaeton. Yeah, there might be some sexualization in there, but at the end of the day, I don't hear them calling their women bitches. And so it's like, why is it within our music? We're constant because they're talking mostly about their love of country, love of people. Like it's completely different. And I talked to one of my friends who's an Afro King, he's an Afro beats master on the dance floor, and I was like, okay, well in Africa there's quite a bit of poverty, right? But Afro beats has come up like whoa, right? But you can take Afro beats and you can put it in any setting, right? Because it's mostly positive. Like you don't hear them cussing people out and stuff. They're talking about love or somebody's woman they trying to take or whatever. But it's not like so derogatory that you can't bring it into a room full of children. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, it's because culturally it is not acceptable in most of Africa, mostly because of religious, you have Muslims, you have Christians. It is not acceptable for that type of music to be played it's just not acceptable. They want positive music. They want positivity. And I was like, because you guys are still in poverty. You're still talking about your experiences and what's going on in your music, in Afrobeats. But you're not talking about shooting and killing somebody. So what happened? What's the difference? So I feel like when we talk about music and we talk about hip hop and violence, let's look at some of the other genres of music that are not necessarily, which has to do with the diaspora, and those that don't have to do with diaspora. And why is it that we only see this threat of violence inside of our culture?
I think the difference is
this is the last word.
The straightforwardness of it. That I listen to country music too. I listen to a lot of different music, and it's there. They been talking about beating their wives, killing their wives,
never heard that
killing, but because the way they do it, especially like let's take country music for instance. It's very we use the Carrie Underwood song. She's talking about vandalizing this man's car.
Yeah, that's why
because he doesn't want to be with her. Like that's
bust your windows out your car.
But it's the way that they do it. Hip hop is a very blunt type of music. And so they just outright say, I'm finna get him, I'm finna roll up on him and empty it out in him. Whereas country would be like, it's just the way that they do, they slide the knife in easier. But it's there. So if we look at these other, I think it's there.
Yeah. Like, and we do have to wrap. So I'm just gonna say that I'll let, Eliana close, but for me, I vehemently disagree with that. I think that this is a part of what I consider to be a lack of accepting the truth. Which is that, yes, there are examples of violence in country music, violence in reggae, violence in reggaeton, violence in these other kinds of music. Completely, 100% agree, right? But we're talking specifically about the overindulgence, right, and the ramifications of that. And it's not to say that violence does not exist in these other places, because there's violence in Africa, there's violence in Latin America, et cetera, et cetera. But the glorification, the amplification, the dollars that amplify this, the culture, right, it's there and it's present. And like my hope and my wish from this conversation is not to, diminish anyone's talent. It's not to take away from our narratives, which do include violence, but it's about telling the truth. Because the last thing that I'll say is that the violence that comes down to the pipeline happens to the most vulnerable of us, right? So the homophobic, misogynistic, specifically specializing in misogynoir, does affect Black women. It affects Black trans women who lay dead disproportionately to everybody else. And it comes from someplace. It comes from religion. It comes from education. But it also does come from the two biggest ways that we consume and learn, which is media, what we see and what we hear. And there is nothing that anybody can do to take that away or to make it not be. And I feel like the more conversations that we have about it, if we are brave enough to be honest about that, I think that we can begin to petition behind and support people who do have more positive things to say. But I think as long as we're not willing to participate honestly in the conversation, the people who don't give a fuck are gonna continue to rise to the top. And they're gonna continue to basically decide what our future looks like. Because now it's mumble rap. And no shade, mumble, be on drugs. Well, if that makes you happy, go ahead. But my thing is like, well, what the fuck is next? What's next?
Yeah.
All right, Eliana, you can.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something because I feel it's so important just with Meg Thee Stallion. As a Black, brown-skinned woman, knowing how she was treated in the media compared to when Takeoff died, I think we have to talk about that too, like how there's such a double standard in the hip hop community. You know, take off, rest in peace, we gotta stop killing each other. Where was that support for Megan?
Mm-hmm.
Y'all are saying she lied, this bitch lied, Drake.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So like calling these things out too and saying, okay, well, why is it that when Megan said she got shot, if she got shot in 2020, people did not believe her. She kept on having to prove herself, saying, yo, I got, like, this nigga almost killed me. Like, he literally abused me. So I feel like in the Black community, you know, when we really talk about accountability, we also have to talk about the double standards within the hip hop community. Because again, Megan, it's like she's this tall, thick Black woman. When Rihanna got beat by Chris Brown, everybody supported Rihanna.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to Megan, because she is brown skinned and thick, and she looks more
sexually liberated.
Right.
She's not a damsel in distress.
She could take care of herself.
She's not worth saving.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the problem in the Black community. I just wanted to add on that before, because I was like, that has to be talked about.
And thank you for saying that. I'm glad that you got to say that, because she is worth saving. And so are all of us, and so are Black women, and by and large. Mm-hmm. Worth saving. So thank you for adding that.
Yeah, I really loved sitting on this conversation and just being more of a listener this time versus, you know, when I host, it's important for me to not just ask the questions, but give the space for the conversation to like really take off. So I'm really happy that we were able to have it. And I also want to speak directly to non-Black folks who are listening to hip hop lovers. Maybe they even like are the hosts of hip hop radio stations and things like that, where, I just hope that they really heard and really digested this conversation, because so often people who don't necessarily contribute to the culture take from the culture and really play it up as if it's theirs when it doesn't necessarily belong to them. It's there to be experienced, not necessarily be taken from. So I really appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much for the conversation and for being so honest about it. I hope it really changes things.
You better end the show. That was a great word to end on. Thank you so much, Tiffanie. Thank you so much, Elijahdā. Thank you, Juice. Thank you, Dr. Donna. Thank you, Marquise. Thank you, Kumoyo. Thank you, TaDeo, Nikki, and the best co-host in the world, Eliana. Thank you for doing this. For all of you at home, please share this conversation with a friend. Please hit that subscribe button, that notification bell. Follow us at The Stranger Fruit on all social media. And just, stay safe. Take care of people. Do not use the N-word if you do not look like us. Don't do it, okay?
Period. Yeah.
Peace the fuck out.
You know I can't help but these, cause they know they can never touch these. So baby, let me talk my shit, or I might just throw another fit.